My name is John Hare. I've been making games since 1985. Okay, so I first saw computers. I was 8 years old in school, and they had like a small fete after school where they had like, you could throw a ball and you could buy some cakes that some old ladies had made, and they had a Pong machine. So it was in my school class when I was 8 years old, the first ever computer game I played. Well, in those days, it was a curiosity. Like, we had no computer games. This is even before we saw any arcade machines, before Atari VCS was around and in our homes. So certainly in the UK, there was no experience like this. So I think it was more a curiosity to me. It was like, I would play the game where you try and smash the rat with a bat, and I would play these throwing ball games, and also I was playing this Pong game. So I think it was just more interesting. When I was about 15, I started to play music with a friend of mine at school. We were in a maths class together, and we found out we both like similar kind of rock music and bands like Rush and these kind of bands. And we decided to create a band. And we played from 15, and 16, 17, 18. And then about 18 or 19, both me and my friend kind of left college in the middle. So he was doing computers and I was doing art and theatre design. And so we then had no work, basically. So we were in a band, trying to make money from a band, but this is impossible. And so we both were quite interested in computer games, like playing arcade games at the time. And we decided that we had a Commodore 64 and we were experimenting with some bits. So we decided to go into making games. And actually, my friend got the job first. He got a job with a local company to be a programmer. And then he was trying to make some work with this company, and he couldn't do the art. So he asked me, could I help him with the art? And the first thing I drew, I think it was a wizard or a dragon. It was about wizards zapping dragons. And then the company liked my work. And so then they invited me to do more work with them. And that was how I started making games. Well, when I very, very first worked in games, I just did pieces of art for other people's games. So like I did something for, I did an early version of International Karate, but it wasn't my art that was used in the end. I did something called Sky Fox. I worked on a Trivial Pursuit game. I worked on a game called RMS Titanic. And these are all pieces of graphics for other people's companies, and I was learning how that worked. And then this Sword of the Sorcerer, where I did the dragons and stuff. And I did, I think it was Grey Wolf and the Eyesores of Terror. I did a screen. And then Chris and I, my friend Chris and I, got asked to make Twister, which was the first game we properly made together. So this was on the Spectrum. And we were just told it's a good game like Tron and a woman with big breasts flying in the sky. So we just made crazy stuff, and I did some caterpillars smoking bongs and weird things flying around. And this was the first game we'd properly made. And actually at that time we were still working for this other company. But we put a hidden Easter egg in the game. You could press some keys and it said by Sensible Software. But this was before we really had our company. And the feeling when we finished the game was we'd actually made, it's more the completion of something. So it wasn't that the game was our idea, because it wasn't our kind of like, the center of the game wasn't our idea, we were commissioned. But the feeling we'd done something and completed it, and it was published, was a special feeling, just to feel a bit more professional, I guess. Oh, the proudest moment is easy. The proudest moment for me in games, there's kind of two. The second most proud is when Whizball got the Zap 64 Game of the Decade. So, I mean, Zap 64 was the king of Commodore 64 magazines, and the decade was the 80s, because there wasn't any other decade, and we got Game of the Decade. So this is like the best game ever on the Commodore 64, according to the best magazine. So this was nice. And then more than that, when we did Sensible Soccer, then we did Sensible World of Soccer, in 2006, Stanford University in California put together a canon of the 10 most influential computer games of all time. So we're talking about Space War, Mario, and other games like this. And our game was in this list of 10. So we're the only game developed in Europe. We were the only sports game. And we were the youngest game, because all the other games were older than us. So this is definitely the proudest moment. It's like being one of the 10 most influential games of all time, which is Sensible World of Soccer. I have really learned a lot from making games, because I've been doing this for 33 years. And I've always been making games in this whole period of time. So starting off firstly on the ZX81 when we did this sort of the Sorcerer, and then going through all the other little pieces we did, and then Whizball, Parallax, Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit, Micro Soccer, Megalomania, Sensible Soccer, Cannon Fodder. People know those. But then also I've done 3 boxing games, 3 commercial boxing games on different platforms, on PlayStation and on Xbox, and on the Wii.
Okay, you have time to speak to the camera, and we would like to take a photo with you, John.
Can you? I'm doing an interview now, so you have to do it afterwards. Yeah.
How many time?
Like 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, we will back.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Would you like to drink a beer?
Later on.
Later on.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you. I have to focus. Sorry.
Where do we get to?
Okay.
Why can't these guys see that you're doing an interview? Anyway. Yeah. So then after Sensible Software, I started doing different things. So I made a couple of boxing games with Codemasters, who we sold our company to. And then I did some work with some small companies, helping them with design and business to sell their games. Some really fun stuff which never came out. So I then had a really annoying period. We did Sex, Drugs and Rock and Roll for 4 years at Sensible. That wasn't released. Then I worked on a Cannon Fodder 3. It was Cannon Fodder 3D with Codemasters. That was stopped and started 3 times internally. That was never released. Then I worked on a game called Virtual TV with a small company. That wasn't released. Then I worked on another game called CCTV, which was about security cameras and you're the policeman trying to catch all the criminals. That wasn't released. So that's like about 8 years of my life where the main games, the main creative games weren't released, but I was doing other stuff in the interim. Commercial stuff. I did a Showtime boxing game. I did a M&M's game with the team in Ukraine. I did a Casper the Friendly Ghost game. And I did about 4 or 5 different football games. I worked as a consultant. And then in 2006, we did Sensible Soccer 2006 with Codemasters, which was, before Sociable Soccer, the best 3D version of the game. And then I started working on mobile phone games. So we did like Cannon Fodder and Sensible Soccer and a rugby game also on the old Nokia phones. And then in 2009, started working on the touchscreen phones. So what did we do? We did a chat app called Memotes, which was like about putting your face into a game so you could talk in a 3D messenger kind of thing. So instead of a smiley face, it was your face smiling with all this advanced technology. And then I did a Speedball on the touchscreens, a couple of other small games on the touchscreens, Word Explorer, my word game, which was the last one that released on the mobile. And then Sociable Soccer, I'm now working with a team in Helsinki, which is great. It's out in Steam Early Access. It's not been updated for a while. It is coming, by the way. Anyone who cares, we're talking to different publishers at the moment. Until we know who we sign with, we're not going to make a decision as to the next step, but we are continuing to develop everything. And we're actually about to release the game in China on mobile for the World Cup. But you won't be able to get it anywhere in Europe with a Chinese league license attached. So I've worked on each of these things, and what it's taught me is that the fashion over time changes. You know, like we had a long period at the start. We did some games on the Commodore 64, and actually the first few games no one paid attention to. And then you had Parallax, Whizball, Micro Soccer, Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit. People were like, oh, these guys are good. So in these days we were getting a lot of respect, but we weren't actually making very much money. And then we did Megalomania, which was again a big hit. We didn't make money because the publishing company fell off a cliff and we lost all our royalties. But then we made Sensible Soccer, and then we started to make really good money. Sensible Soccer with Cannon Fodder, and then Cannon Fodder 2, and Sensible World of Soccer. Then we had WizKid, which was a cool little game in the middle there, and Sensible Golf, it's not so good. But this period of time, we were really successful. 3 years, loads of money, loads of success, loads of #1 hits. And then we sold the company because the fashion changed from 2D to 3D, and we were really bad at 3D at Sensible Software. We were terrible. We were 2 years behind everyone, you know? So, and then I started working as consulting staff and working on different machines, but now it wasn't my team. So you got a different role. Like, you're not paying the wages, which is fantastic, but you're not having so much control, and you're more supporting teams and getting commission to do specific things. And this is good in a way that you're not having to worry about managing a team. So it's less burden financially, but in a way you're traveling a lot, which is fun, but it takes a lot of your time. and you're never quite achieving what you wanted to achieve. And of course, the fashion industry is moving all the time, so we couldn't sign any more 2D games when we stopped Sensible. No one would buy them from us anymore. And then the fashion changed again, and people started to want some mobile phone games, the old ones, but the deals were terrible commercially, really junk deals. Like, no one had any respect for people, no matter how experienced they were. The mobile companies treated all developers like just stuff you trade on the floor that a dog's done. That's how we were treated, all of us. And then you got the consoles moving up, the PlayStations and the Xboxes, and the Wii came out, which was something new. And then touchscreens is something new. Free-to-play gaming in the last 5 or 6 years has been something new. So you constantly have to adapt. So actually the long-term story of making games is about adapting in an environment you can't control. You know, you have to find what you can do, and I'm lucky that I have a few skills. So obviously my main skill is to be a lead game designer, or a creative director. So I tend to lead the design, help to direct the team, so the other designers, the artists, the programmers, just so we, like a film director is the easiest thing. But I can also do the business side, so I do a lot of work on contracts and making sure that enough money's coming in and that kind of stuff. And they're my main two things, and I guess leading the team a little bit. And those kind of bases, design and business, is what I always fall back on. But I have to constantly adapt both of them. And sometimes you're ahead of the curve, and sometimes you're behind the curve. It depends on the platforms and the way it moves. So the technology industry is very frustrating to work in for many reasons. Firstly, you're constantly relearning stuff all the time. And even if you're not, the whole programming team is constantly taking old knowledge and putting it onto new knowledge. And most programmers, they do their best games on the machine when it's their third or more game on that device. It's what's kind of invisible to people. I'm a non-programmer. I've worked with programmers my whole life as a non-programmer. And so sometimes I'm waiting for them to catch up. Like they're learning how to do 3D, or how to work with touchscreens, or how to do stuff in Unity, or how to do free-to-play. You know, everyone's learning all the time. And that goes up and down in phases as to whether you're in a good or a low peak. But you have to just remain consistently confident that your own skill is there, but not too confident, because you have to keep on learning all the time, you know. And as I've got older, I've enjoyed like being able to share my knowledge with younger teams. Again, it's frustrating. There's no real system to make it easy to get payment to do this. Everyone in this current era of games have forgotten it's your job, it's your profession. You need to earn money for it. And people often ask me about the difference between the old days and the new days and blah, blah, blah. So many people call themselves game developers, game designers, stuff now, but they're not. What's happened is the platform's opened up, so anybody can upload a build of something onto the App Store, for example, to make it run. But any child in a kindergarten when it's 3 can scribble a drawing of their house and their mother and their father and put it on the wall. This is the same. So what's happened is the big media companies have never given respect to the professional game creators on any level, like the great programmers, the great artists, the great designers, the great producers, the great sound guys. They don't see that not everyone is equal. Some of us are more equal than others, is what I'm saying. So the problem we've had is that the very financially accounting-driven heart of the big publishers and the big media companies can't differentiate between someone like me who's been making games for 33 years and some young boy who's like I was back when I was 19 in my friend's bedroom. They can't see the difference in experience. And that's been quite frustrating for good, what we call good indie teams now. So, you know, the thing is there's a lot of indie teams, most of them are useless. They can't make an original game, and then they try to copy a game. Now you can do, like a good example is Candy Crush. Candy Crush is a great copy of Bejeweled kind of game, but it's so good, it deserves its place. But most teams can't make better copies, they just make worse copies of something that's not original. They don't deserve to exist in an artistic level. But it's so geared around the finance and the channels and the technology, everyone misses that it's about great art. And great art is not a democracy. Most people haven't got it. Most people don't deserve to be there. And when we flood the game space, so when we used to make games, like in the Amiga years, there was the number of games released per day on the Amiga was about 3 a day.
Legendary Joe Hare.
Yes.
Composer from Fodder.
I'm in the middle of an interview.
Yes.
Okay.
Cheers for you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. Pleasure.
For you.
The thing which is hard for people from the outside of the industry to understand is the volume of games, like the amount of it. So, in the Amiga days, when we released Sensible Soccer, for example, in '92, even into the PlayStation 2 days, we're talking now 2003, 2004, you got 3 games per day on the leading platform. Now, on the mobile phones as we speak, it's over 300 games per day, sometimes 400 games per day. Now the key thing is, not a single person in the Amiga days or the PlayStation 2 days said there wasn't enough games. So we've now got 100 times more games than we need being chucked through these channels because people make money from traffic online. Yeah? So people are making a lot of money from all this movement of rubbish basically that doesn't need to be there. It's my view. It's okay for people like me. I have a reputation in the industry. I've earned my reputation over time and whatever. The teams really suffering right now are the very talented new young teams that instead of like they've got their one game being the 1 out of 3, they've not got their games the 1 out of 300. So the chance of being discovered is just being masked by this sea of rubbish. And the consequence, again, people don't see this. Now, if you're on a mobile phone, 30% of the money is given to the channel, to your Steam or Apple or Google. That's okay actually, that's less than the old days for distribution. But 56% of the money goes on marketing and user acquisition right now. And the reason so much money is spent on marketing is there's so many games, your game can't get seen. So for the industry, for the players of the games, and for the people making the games, what we need is less games. And what we need is to politely suggest to the people who are not professional enough to not make the games on these platforms. The problem isn't their problem. The problem is the platform holders have got no respect for game makers and have mixed us all together. Like, you're just all stupid people making stuff, just put your product through our channel, we don't care. And this is what we're seeing right now. What we need is a channel to be elitist and say, okay, this is an art form, it's not a democracy. All the good stuff's here. And you know, go to the rubbish farm, go to the scrap heap and try and find a brand new Mercedes buried under 200 rusty old cars. That's kind of where we are now. So that's my kind of feeling as a person. Is now I'm like 52. I used to be 19 when I started doing this. Now I'm getting to senior years. I'm a professor in a university, or honorary professor in a local university, which is nice. I work with BAFTA, which do get game awards. So I'm starting to get some of these things you hope to get in my experience. But it's how you can share this knowledge and how you can have power to, not on my own, but with lots of other people with similar experience, how we can have power to get the channels to understand that people come into this show, to Pixel Heaven, not to play trashy old games, to play the classic old games they loved, right? And the games currently being made today will in the future be classic games, yeah? But it's only going to be like 4 or 5 a year. It doesn't matter if you put out 400 a day. So I can't even do the maths on that. 400 times 365, a lot of games a year, right? Only 5 of those are going to be classic hits that are remembered. What's the point in all the rubbish being there? And if we want great games, and it sounds on one side to be nice that everyone has a chance to do this stuff, to make games. But for the game players, they only care about the great games and what's going to become the classic games. You know, and if you look at in any art form, music, books, film, it's the same. You know, we choose naturally the best. And by and large, people tend to agree what the best are, you know. But the digital platforms have taken away the cost of production on games. And that lack of cost of production, by that I mean like in an old Amiga game, when you had the box, the manual, the disc, this physically cost about €4 to make this, 3 or 4 euros. And they'd have to make 10,000 at a time. So they had a minimum 40,000 spend to physically make the unit. That stopped bad games coming out. Because no one was willing to waste the money to make the thing no one wanted to buy. Now because it's free to make the copy. It's not physical. This is why the floodgates have opened, and because there's no publishing mentality in the channel holders in the technology companies, they deliberately want as much volume of traffic as possible. There's no one is policing quality on the top level, and it's not just affecting games, it's affecting all of the media at the moment. And I think it's sad, because if you look at the history of media, we have our classic authors, our classic composers, our classic filmmakers, you know. Really, games should be in that same kind of space. You'll also realise, like, now I come to Pixel Heaven, people like you want to talk to me. Why? Because you know my name, you know Sensible Software, or you know John Hare, me. Why? Because in those days, we were allowed to push our developer name on the games, which we did, working with publishing companies in partnership. And then the magazines would talk to us personally about how we made the games, like you're doing with me now, right? Who gets personally talked to out of the team that makes FIFA right now? Or the team that makes Call of Duty? Or the team that makes all of these big games? They're just faceless. You only know, like, EA and Apple, or EA and PlayStation. And the name of the artist has deliberately been removed from our art form. And that upsets me, because in history, like, I'm proud I can say we've got this game in this top 10 influential games of all time. Even though some American guys will go, what game? Because the game never sold in America. But I wish other people who are good at what they're doing, you know, in their time, you know, I'm still making games now, Sociable Soccer, I'm very proud of it. I think it's the best 3D football game I've ever made. But maybe my time to be great, really great, has gone now, you know. Maybe I have other roles to do to mentor people. But we need to respect first their skills, that there's some people that deserve the attention and the support, and I'm talking now about the new teams. And some people need to be thrown in the bin, so you can give these guys more support. And if you look at sport as a good example, so if you're the Manchester United manager, and every single player who ever wants to play for Manchester United, imagine you let them all play for the team. But not just that, you let them all run on the pitch and play on the Saturday against Liverpool, because you're trying to be nice to everybody. What are the fans going to think in the stadium when this, like, weedy 16-year-old kid runs on and falls over when he gets tackled? This is where we are with games right now. All this amateur stuff mixed with professional stuff. And it's good that people can learn the skills, but people have to understand this is a job and a profession, and some people are better than others. In the film world, we do kind of know the best actors and that, and mostly people agree on who their favourite actors are. There's a broad list of variety, which is great, but best directors, the best actors, even the best in the industry, the best costume makers, the best people in makeup or lighting or all these specialisations, special effects. But for some reason in our industry, the individual has been taken out of the public knowledge of what we do, you know. And even for my role, you know, I'm just a guy who's the lead designer in the game normally. I'm not the lead programmer. I'm not doing the great art anymore. I haven't done art for years. You know, I'm not doing a lot of these roles. There's other brilliant people I'm working with all the time. And I really get frustrated that it's so hidden, that our industry is about people making stuff in teams of brilliant people doing stuff together. Very much like a sports team, you know, very much like an acting company or something like this. And I wish it was possible to share this kind of message with people, that that's what we do. I've thought a number of times about, do I want to continue making games, do I want to do something else? Obviously I write music, I play music, I'm interested in writing books, I'd be interested in writing scripts for films actually. That's something, I grew up around the theatre a lot. My father's a good amateur actor, so I'm always interested in like scripts and stuff like that because I've grown up around it. I studied theatre at college. So they're things I would like to do, but I guess the problem is you go to the bottom of the ladder in a new industry. Like you're now a junior in a way. I do a lot of teaching with universities, by the way. I've helped people to establish their university curriculum. I've been teaching for 5 or 6 years in Westminster University in London about game design and various other things. So I'm quite interested in the education aspect. Yes, I would love to do other stuff. And the big question for me is, do I want to do any more original games? Now I'm doing Sociable Soccer. It's now another 2.5 years so far. It will be 3.5 before we're finished, easy. maybe longer. With Word Explorer was 4 years. When I did Sex and Rock and Roll, it was 4 years. These are long things. Once you start again, you're like in. And I don't know how much more of that I'm prepared to do when you have to fight. It's taken us 2.5 years to have a good commercial deal on the table for social soccer. That is 2.5 years of, in the background, constantly doing business meetings to get someone to offer you money. The totally invisible part people don't see, because we can't perpetuate the game's existence without the money to feed the people making the game. And before the game's out, it doesn't earn money. And it's taken 2.5 years so far to make it, and we're not even finished. Again, you know, good stuff takes time. Even in the old days, all the good stuff took time. So, yes, I would love to do other stuff, but I never know when, and I always come back to games. Just like a lot of people. But I think first I want to finish the current game, social soccer, and then hopefully that will go on for a few years. It's a sports game, you know, season by season by season. Working with the team I'm working with now a bit more and stuff. But I don't know how many more times I want to do this after now. But who knows? I could be saying the same thing in 10 years. I did say it 10 years ago, so